I have to learn so that I can become a better writer. And nobody's ever going to get it perfect. That perfection doesn't exist, you know? And so you can't really try to satisfy that aspect of it.
Welcome back to Direct Edition, a podcast about nothing and everything. I am your host, Dave. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the interview with Larry Reed of Fantagraphics last week. Well, today I've got a writer on the show. That writer is Robert Venditti. Robert Venditti is currently writing a whole bunch of books for Bad Idea. The one most recently that came out was called Ordained. And Ordained was actually is going to be optioned for movie. Colin Farrell is already attached, but the comic itself hit the shelves a couple weeks ago, and it's fantastic. It's a lot of fun, and you're going to hear all about it from Robert himself. Interestingly enough, and I told Robert this, that I wasn't super familiar with the early part of his career, but being a fan of Bad Idea, you know, getting into Planet Death, which he also wrote with Derek Kolstad, and as well as Wayshack and Mike Carey's book Cul-de-sac, and getting to know Dinesh. I'm all in on it. I'm enjoying what they're putting out that I've read. They're fun comics. The way that they're printing in different formats is also really good. So we get into the heart of his writing, and, you know, kind of we focus really on this book a lot, his storytelling, but then towards the end we get to talk about things like music, and we get to talk about horror, which you'll hear Robert talk about. Before we start with the interview, I would ask you to consider subscribing, hit the like button, drop a comment down below after you're done watching the interview. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple, you can leave comments and rate the podcast there, but just subscribe. I think you'll enjoy hearing all these interviews that I'm bringing forth and the stuff that I've already put out. So without further ado, here's my chat with Robert Venditti. Welcome back, everybody. Today's guest is doing more books than most people will do in a year. Currently, he is the writer of Hank Howard Pizza Detective, Survive, Planet Death, and Ordained through Bad Idea. And his past books include Surrogates, which was his first, Exo Manowar, Green Lantern, Percy Jackson adaptation, Superman, Hawkman, and also working with the YouTuber Mr. Ballen. But today, I'm chatting with Robert Venditti. Robert, how are you?
I'm doing great. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. I
don't have the cool background lighting, you know. I just got like that bright, garish, terrible lights, but I'll do better next time.
Yeah, all you got to do is buy these little track light things, and then at Home Depot, and they connect to your phone, and you can change the colors and make it look like a warm, comfy place.
Yeah, my teenager has them in his bedroom.
Yeah. Well, I also have to make up for the fact that, you know, it's winter time in the Pacific Northwest, so we have pretty much no sun, you know, up until maybe March or April. So I have to pretend that I'm in a warm, comfortable place.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that we were able to do this, because Ordained, which is, you know, your newest output from Bad Idea, but you also have Planet Death going on right now, and Hank Howard. It's going into its third printing, which is crazy because I didn't even hear it was going into a second printing on the first issue.
What's even crazier is I haven't even seen it yet.
I haven't owned it. I don't
even have a copy. No, it's pretty wild. It sold out pretty quickly, and I think, you know, I don't get involved in like the sales side of things too much, but from what I understand, you know, from Dinesh at Bad Idea and Peter and Sienna Found, who's the head of sales for Bad Idea, is you know, they got the orders in. They did a pretty sizable overprint, which is what you do. You do an overprint, you know, of X number of copies, so that when reorders come in, you have it, you know. And the overprint had already sold through before the book even came out, because of reorders coming in, because I guess excitement around the book started to generate. And then the first printing and the second printing, I think, were sold out in the first week, maybe, or something, you know. And so they're soliciting a third printing now, and they delayed the release of the second issue about a month, or maybe not a full month, maybe 3 weeks or so. But they delayed it so that the third printing of number one could come out at the same time, so that retailers would have a first issue to sell to get these new readers on board before trying to sell them a second issue without a first one, So that's not really happened to me before, that kind of acceleration that quickly in that short of a time frame, particularly when you put it over the Christmas and New Year's holidays, which generally tends to be a slow time, So, really, really happy that the response to the book has been that positive, and hopefully people continue to like what we're doing with the story.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a piece of it. I'm imagining the hype built up was the announcement that it's being optioned and worked on as a movie by Derek Kolstad, and Colin Farrell's already aboard. But even on Bad Ideas side, from my perspective, reading Planet Death and knowing that they had a slate of books that they've been working on for 18 months, kind of getting ready for it, I started seeing the cover, the first cover photo, which I'll flash on the screen, and I'm like, "Oh, this is interesting. I haven't seen a story about a priest in comic book format since Preacher, and we're 30 years removed from Preacher." And I was excited to read it, and I don't own a physical copy either because I was out of the country when it came out, but I read it digitally, and it hit. Literally, it hit on all of the levels that you would want for a good character-driven story that's action-based.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's definitely what we were going for. When I had the idea for the story and I pitched it to Bad Idea, to sort of ask him, "Is this something y'all be interested in doing or whatever?" I had a feeling like it was a good idea. You don't always know. As a writer, I think I've written over 400 things at this point. And you don't always know. But that one, I felt like I sort of had the chocolate and the peanut butter, and we might have a Reese's cup. But you never know until it comes out and you see what the responses are. And there's certainly times when I think a book is going to be really well received and it's not as much, and there's times when I don't think a book will be well received at all, and it is. And so you never really know, but I felt like we had a strong concept, and I don't know, I would imagine definitely having the film announcement helps and things, but I also know that Bad Idea and myself and Sienna and Brock McKinney and the whole team have been putting assets out there and promoting the book, I think over a year, so before it came out.
Feels like that.
So I've been talking about it at panels for a while, and it's something. I have a lot of books that are coming out right now, but they're books that I worked on over a span of, I'm not writing them all monthly right now, right? I wrote them over a span of probably about 18 months. And so, it took a while for them to come out, and it was nice because it only existed in comic book script form. I'd written the whole series when I was working with Derek on Planet Death. And Bad Idea asked Derek if he'd be interested in reading this other thing that I'd written by myself, because Planet Death is Derek's idea, and I'm co-writing it with him, but he's the lead writer on that book. And he was like, yeah, and I'll take a look. And so he read, the whole comic book script. We didn't have any art assets or anything yet. And, he really, really liked it and said he wanted to come on board to adapt it. And again, that's one of those things where you start to feel like, maybe we've got a good idea here, because not that Hollywood sort of validates, comics or anything
definitely
like that.
Does not.
Yeah, but Derek is somebody who writes this kind of story and really excels at this kind of story, So to have a writer whose work I admire, I was floored when I saw John Wick and the amount of world building and mythology that he created in that movie. And every single thing is something you're like, wow, nobody ever thought of that before, which are always the best ideas, for him to have him respond to the comic book script positively the way he did was a really nice feeling too,
Yeah. Speaking of your collaboration with him, how did the two of you meet? Because Planet Death is, I championed that book when it came out, and I absolutely love it. It feels like kind of the perfect feeling of how I got when I played Halo for the first time, or Gears of War. It's got that kind of feel to it with this huge scope, but it's focused on this one guy.
Yeah.
But,
I met Derek through Bad Idea. I think Derek and Dinesh had a prior relationship, maybe through some film things and whatnot. And this was an idea that already existed as sort of a treatment, and not having, to my knowledge, I don't think Bad Idea had really tried before this kind of thing where a writer gets paired with somebody from another medium and they do a book together.
Yeah.
Certainly that happens in comics, but I don't know that Bad Idea, I could be wrong, but I don't know that they've done it before. So Dinesh was going overseas for something, and he sent the document to me, and I read it, and I really enjoyed it. And I talked to him about it a little bit, kind of, my thoughts on the main character, and talked to Derek a little bit about it and things. And then Dinesh went overseas, and I couldn't get it out of my head, and so I just started writing it, and Dinesh hadn't told me, yeah, go ahead and write it or whatever. I was like, I'm just going to start writing this thing, and if it doesn't work out, it'll go in the desk drawer, and I lose, my work that I put into it, and that's the way it goes, But I wrote the whole first issue. It's, I think, 40 pages. I wrote it in 3 days, and it was the only time I'd really, which is very fast for me. I don't write at that speed at all, And so it was the first time I ever wrote a series, and my adrenaline was up, as I was writing these scenes in this first issue, which kind of plays out almost like a D-Day style invasion in outer space, where these human soldiers and these big battle armors are dropping out of spaceships and landing and then charging against the enemy and meeting on the battlefield. There's missiles and ships getting shot down, all this stuff.
Carnage.
It was my adrenaline was up as I was writing it. And it was I couldn't really relax until I got through that whole thing, And so Dinesh got home from his trip, and I told him I'd written it, and he was kind of like, dude, I didn't say you could write it yet, And I was like, don't worry about it, man. If you guys don't like it, it's totally fine. It's on me, don't sweat it. And, but him and Derek really liked it. And so, it was kind of off and running from there,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I think, that being the first of their new slate of books to come out really kicked off. And then we get Cul-de-sac, and John's a friend, but finally getting to see that. I know John's been working on it for years. It's gorgeous. And
the thing I like about, it's amazing stuff. In the originals, when you see him in person, he's oil painting those pages, He's a super nice guy too. But the thing I really like about Bad Idea as a publisher is the sort of breadth of the content that they put out. I think a lot of publishers, particularly indie publishers, will sort of become known for doing a certain kind of story, like a certain style of thing. And if you look at Bad Idea Slate right now, and you've got some stuff like Planet Death and Cul-de-sac, which is like a coming of age horror story, and Ordained, which is very grounded, sort of street level crime story. They've got another book that they haven't announced yet that I know that's coming. That's very different from all those things I just described, And so there's really a variety of material, and it's really just about what's the best story and what makes the best story, as opposed to we're looking to fill this kind of hole, and we're looking to put this kind of thing into our pub plan to service such and such reason or whatever, They really just want to put out the best stories, and you end up with something like Cul-de-sac, that's John Wick and Mike Carey, and it's just beautiful stuff to look at, and right down to the production values, with Cul-de-sac and also with Ordained, it's printed on a newsprint, and I think it really kind of, I don't know if accentuates is the right word, but it really kind of is additive, I think, to the reading experience for something that's street level crime, or for something like Wayshak's art, which has this beautiful scratchiness to it and things, whereas you get something like Planet Death, which is sci-fi and it's spaceships and it's on a slicker paper, So Bad Idea really puts a lot of thought into how the package is presented as well. And that just makes it a great place to be,
I think that trying things like that, they just did the Planet Death, the oversized, huge tome on Kickstarter, and just trying different formats really lends to for people like myself who've been reading comics for 35, 40 years, and like the tactile experience of holding a book and trying different stuff means you're trying. And, when I look at certain aspects of the big two, looking at you, Marvel, they're not trying. DC definitely trying, and so with Bad Idea, it really speaks to, like you said, stories, stuff that you don't have to worry about the other book. Like if I'm reading Ordained and I'm not yet reading Planet Death, there's no connected universe. So I can just read that story and enjoy it and then get to that story.
Well, so you think. I mean, we haven't had the aliens show up in Ordained yet, but I don't want to give away any spoilers or anything.
Yeah.
Father Roy's going to show up and do some last rites on the battlefield in Planet Death, Yeah.
That, I mean, okay, if there was ever like a alternate, like a kind of like out of continuity or out of story thing, and Father Roy shows up and just kicks the shit out of all of those aliens, I'm there for that. I am there for that.
Yeah, I pitched that idea on a big universe spanning thing that connects all the titles right down to Hank Howard Pizza Detectives. So I don't know if we'll ever do it one day, but I didn't pitch it. We were having a conversation one day, and it was like, "What if this?" And like we started talking about it. I was like, "Actually, yeah, I think that kind of works." But that stuff would be much farther down the road.
It's not called Bad Idea for no reason.
That's right. That's right.
Because bad, remember when bad used to mean bad, that's one thing, but bad then started meaning good.
Yeah. So it's like, what is the thing from Megalith? Not Megalith, Megamind. When he's talking to like his fish head friend, and he's like, "Yeah, this idea is bad good. This idea is bad bad." Yeah. There's a thin line between those two things for sure. Yeah,
there is. So getting back to Ordained, and I had a blast reading it. I read it again. I enjoyed kind of the second read where I can focus on a little more aspects of some of the dialogue and then the art, because for me, when I'm reading a book, I'm always kind of reading the story before I'm really paying attention to details in the art. But Trevor Hairsine, is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Harrison? Yeah. He, I mean, I don't know. I wanted to ask you how you write your scripts, because like his action is pretty in depth, and like there's a lot going on in the way that he's drawing these fight scenes of, and I wanted to tell people, like, we can talk about the plot a little bit without going into too much spoiler territory, but the father, he's kicking ass and not taking names. He's just kicking ass.
Yeah. So the premise of Ordained is the main character is a priest named Father Roy, and he gets called to a hospital to perform last rites at the request of a dying patient. And he gets in the room, and as he's talking with the patient, who's an older man, he realizes this guy is an old Irish gangster, the head of the Irish mafia. So his name's Cormac Byrne, and he tells Father Roy, confesses all the stuff he's done in his life, up to and including murder, because he's not going to make it through the night. And Father Roy completes confession and absolves him of his sins, and performs last rites and leaves. Well, Cormac Byrne ends up making a miraculous recovery, and he's not going to die now. So he has to kill the priest that knows all the secrets. So he sends his crew and eventually hitmen and everybody to go kill Father Roy. But Father Roy wasn't always a priest. He has a past as well. And it turns out he's not real easy to kill. And so that's kind of the underlying concept of the series. As far as my scripting style, I'd written the entire thing before I even knew who the artist was going to be. And that's been a pretty common thing in my career, it's much rarer that I will know who the artist is going in on a book, especially because a lot of times I write them before I even pitch them to somebody,
Right.
And so my scripting style will just kind of be open and hopefully able to be interpreted by anybody, because a lot of the artists I work with, English wouldn't even be their first language,
No, that's true.
So the scripting style is pretty static. Hawkman would be an exception. I knew it was going to be Brian Hitch before I started writing, and so I talked to Brian in advance and found out what he kind of liked in the script and those kinds of things. And that was actually the first time really I'd done plot first style.
Okay.
And yeah, it was amazing. The scripting style kind of tends to be what it is. I think. I don't know. Looking at other writers and things, I think that my panel descriptions could be a little longer than some, not as long as others, but I tend to have the information in the description be indicative of emotion in some way, like how can I best convey to the artist what the emotions of the the moment are in terms of not just throwing a punch or whatever, but in terms of the delivery of a line of dialogue. What's the character feeling as they're delivering that line and stuff. And that's just so that the artist can know the most information to do the acting for the characters and that kind of stuff, and I would definitely say that the script is that way too, and the script gets shorter as you go along, in something like Planet Death, those scripts will tend to be more full of information because you have to describe what the ships look like in the alien world and the alien culture and all that stuff, right? Whereas something like Ordained, it's a church and it's St. Louis and it's a priest, and these are all familiar things. Cars are cars and people are people, and a hospital is a hospital, and you don't really have to dig in on that stuff, Right. Whereas something like Planet Death, you do. So the first issue will be longer in terms of those descriptions, but after that, you've already set all that up, and those scripts now tend to get shorter because you don't have to repeat that information over and over again, So there's different ways of doing it, I guess, depending on the situation.
Yeah, and there's one kind of specific moment in Ordained that really stuck out to me. Asking about the script, there's they're in the church, and he's kind of at least taken one guy to the ground, and he took the other guy's gun, and he gets the gun, cocks it, steals it, and then turns it around butt end first. Was that in the script? Did you detail that out? Because I just thought that stood out because he's not going to shoot them. He's going to
in my memory it's in the script. I'm pretty sure it's in the script because it was always baked into the idea that Father Roy doesn't kill.
Right.
He as I alluded to, he has a past that we're going to find out in the series. And this is just a line he won't cross, which is a complicating factor for him because everybody else is trying to kill him, and they're not playing by that rule. He doesn't even really want to get pushed to fight at all. But in the opening issue, there's an innocent bystander who gets shot and needs help, and Father Roy isn't going to be able to help him until he gets through these guys that shot that person. And so, he picks up the gun and he kind of reflexively checks it and reloads it and whatever.
Yeah.
Because that's what he would do normally. But then he catches himself and he turns the gun around and he uses the butt as a weapon instead of shooting to kill, and we do a lot of those kinds of things throughout the series. And as we continue on, he gets in tougher and tougher situations where it becomes more and more difficult, to not resort to that sort of ultimate level of violence. And that's kind of a push-pull that drives the series for Father Roy at an internal character level, as opposed to the external forces that he's facing. He has an internal conflict that he's dealing with as well,
I thought that moment really stuck out to me. It's it's a characteristic of you're explaining it, and I got that right there. I was like, oh, he doesn't want to kill him. What I thought also was interesting on the preview solicits for the next issue, the cover, it's maybe the Malieve cover. He's holding the gun by the barrel and not the handle, and it's covered in blood. And I'm like, oh, he is going to continue to beat people with the gun.
He'll beat them with some other stuff too.
Yeah.
As we go throughout the series, he doesn't like this aspect of himself.
Sure.
He wants to keep it on a shelf. But Cormac Byrne is putting him in a situation where he's having to take it back down again because as everybody's trying to catch Father Roy and kill him, the city's kind of caught in the crossfire,
Right.
And so he has to confront those things about his past and struggle with how he's going to get around this sort of moral code that he has while also not allowing harm to come to those around him, And to me, that was the most fun, and I wouldn't say fun, but the most rewarding about running the series. When you challenge yourself in situations like that and you have to, figure your way out of them, as opposed to a character like XO, who the very first thing they do is kill somebody because that's the aesthetic that character comes from, and they're a medieval warrior, and it's interesting as a writer to challenge yourself with those different types of characters and different approaches to things, sort of get outside your comfort zone and see what you can come up with in terms of story.
I've heard other writers talk about writing themselves or writing their characters into a corner, and that that seems like the best way to figure out a path to get out is, back yourself up to a place where you got to figure it out.
Yeah. And to talk about, writing more generally a little bit, like I've always found, there's different kinds of writing. You do something creator owned and you kind of are free to do whatever you want, whatever the continuities you want to make up and all those kinds of things. And that's one kind of creativity. But if you're working like something like Marvel or DC and you're in an established universe or whatever, and you're now within sort of the box of this character's continuity and a wider continuity of that universe and the rules that have been established and all these things, you now come up with creative solutions to problems that you wouldn't have if the box didn't exist in the first place,
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, constraints can breed creativity, so it isn't something as a writer that you should be afraid of, because you'll end up finding out things about yourself as a writer and things about your characters that you wouldn't know if not for the existence of the box,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you, you've done all of it, you've done the continuity, you were in DC for a while, you've done adaptations with the Percy Jackson stuff. Is it enjoyable for you to just kind of do different things so that you don't get stale? Is that kind of how you feel in your 20 years?
Very early on in my career, I decided that I was going to try to do something different with every project, just so I'm always challenging myself, and they don't always come out the way that I would want. Mm-hmm. But even the projects that are like that, I wouldn't trade them, because you learn something from them, and you're never going to get it right. Like it's art, it's writing, like anything, it's like any creative endeavor. It's not mathematical, you're not going to solve it. Right. So all you can do is hope to get better each time. And so even the instances where, maybe now looking back, the stories aren't exactly what I wanted them to be, because maybe I didn't have the skill set yet, or I didn't understand the mechanics of the larger universe or any of that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. I can show you how those learning experiences led to things that did come out the way I wanted, and that I am very proud of. And so there's nothing that I would go back and sort of pull out and throw away, because, if I like the stories that I'm working on now, I couldn't have gotten there without the stories that I wrote along the way.
Sure.
And I think there can be a tendency sometimes, and I get it, I'm not criticizing anybody, but I think there can be a tendency sometimes with fandom to want the story to be great right away. And every writer starts somewhere, and everybody has a first day on the job, and, your first day is not going to be as good as your day when you're a 20-year veteran. Like, that's just the reality of it, And so I remember when I came onto Green Lantern and I was taking over after Geoff Johns, who probably the most legendary run in the history of the character, if not in the modern era, maybe completely, chief creative officer of DC Comics, a modern master of the superhero genre and the comic book medium. I came in to take over Green Lantern after him. I'd written maybe 8 comic books in my life, like I'd written 4 comic books for DC, and they were all Demon Knights, which was set in like the years of Arthurian legend, and Camelot and things.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of backlash to it, and my stories weren't as good as Geoff Johns's. I didn't have a command of Green Lantern or superhero comics or the DC universe in the way that Geoff Johns did. And those criticisms in that regard were warranted, but I didn't take them personally, because I know that it's my first day on the job and I'm learning. If I'm still getting those criticisms 20 years later, that'd be a different thing. And I like to think that by the time I got to the end of Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps, 86 issues of Green Lantern later, I was a very different writer than when I started. And if you start with Green Lantern number 21 and go all the way to Hal Jordan, the Green Lantern Corps number 50, I think you can see the evolution of a writer who's learning about the superhero medium and the DC universe and Green Lantern. And, I'm very proud of how those stories came out, but I wouldn't have those stories at the end if I didn't also write those stories at the beginning,
Right. They made you they made you the writer that you were and are now.
Yeah.
I think, and you touched on something, you mentioned fandom, and this podcast is built around like the idea of classic fandom, how comics started, right? Comics and music and a lot of that stuff comes from fanzines and fandom. The Bernie Wrightson, Roy Thomas, all these guys were fans before they were creators. And I think it's we should always go and look back at somebody's early work because it gives us a better understanding of who they are now. Like you said, one of the things that I equated to often is music. And a band that I can think of that everybody kind of knows is Radiohead. You listen to Pablo Honey, their first album with Creep. It's kind of not that good, but you can see they got their foot in their door and they started, and then the Bends came out, and then OK Computer came out, and it's considered one of the greatest albums of all time. The Beatles, the same thing. Look at the Beatles when they started. They were a boy band. And look at the Beatles when they ended. They're the greatest band of all time. But they don't become that without starting their first the way they started.
Yeah. Most cases, yeah, certainly in my case. But you do get those, you do get that Doors first album or Jimi Hendrix Experience's first album where they just come out of the gate and it's like, what just happened,
Sure.
And you get the sense that this is an album that was worked on over the course of a life. And then the record label says you have 12 months to do another one. And sometimes the second one isn't as good as that debut because and that can happen with novels as well, right? Like that first debut novel comes out and it just cracks the world in half. And then the publisher's like, yeah, but your deadline for the next one is a year. But they've been working on that first one for 12 years, And so there can definitely be that kind of scenario as well. I wouldn't put myself in that. But you definitely have those debuts sometimes where, I can't even imagine what the world would have been like the first time somebody put on Are You Experienced? Like, what was that even like for that person?
Mind blowing.
So those moments happen as well.
Yeah. And I think when it comes in terms to fandom, it's like people do jump to a conclusion immediately, and there are so many instances in comics that we could, probably talk about where it's like people dogpiled on this person, and then 10 years later, this person's career is like the archetype for what everybody wants to do.
Or sometimes that person disappears too, right? And like
this is true.
I think that first of all, every overnight success is 10 years in the making. And so like Jimi Hendrix was, I'm sure, playing clubs and gigs and polishing his sound way before he ever got into the studio and did Are You Experienced? Same for the Doors. But I think for the fans, like I get it, right? The fans are spending their same $3 on a Robert Venditti Green Lantern comic that they would spend on a Geoff Johns Green Lantern comic, or maybe it was $3.99 back then. I don't remember. And they want the same value for their money. And so I'm not discounting that at all, and I'm not invalidating the criticism or any of that. I just think as a writer, or as an artist, or as a musician, or whatever, you have to be able to. I remember when I was in school for creative writing, I didn't read comic books growing up at all. I started reading them when I was in like my late 20s. So I'm in school for fiction writing, and I'm in creative writing class, and I would write a story that had no dialogue in it whatsoever. It was just exposition, right, and auditory stuff, sounds or smells or whatever. Then the next story I turned in would be nothing but dialogue, no exposition whatsoever, just because I'm trying to challenge myself in these ways. And I remember I would turn these stories in sometimes, quite often, and just get absolutely ridiculed by everybody else in the room. You sit in a circle and you workshop each other's stories, and this is my week. Everybody's going to talk about my story for an hour, and they're just destroying it, because they all know they've got writing figured out, and they've already solved it, and they know they're going to be the next Hemingway and write the great American novel or whatever. In my head, I knew that I didn't have it figured out. I know that I'm not ready to be a writer. That's why I'm in this class. And so I'm challenging myself in these ways, and hopefully I learn something and I come out of it on the other end, And so I think as somebody in the arts, the criticism is out there and it exists and it's valid. And anybody who thinks I'm the worst writer in the world is just as right as somebody who thinks I'm the best writer in the world, right? It's all subjective. So as an artist, I think you have to just understand it's there, but not let it get to you. Not let it say to you, I'm not as good as Geoff Johns, so I might as well just stop writing. You have to be able to say, I have to learn so that I can become a better writer. And Geoff Johns himself is going to continue to learn and become a better writer. And nobody's ever going to get it perfect. That perfection doesn't exist, And so you can't really try to satisfy that aspect of it because, that way lies madness,
Yeah. And comparing yourself to somebody else's career also, that is can lead to madness too. When you put maybe use it as a goal to get to where you feel like you are, but yeah, like, this, when people compare comic books and writers and people's runs, it's like, well, these are two different people or two different artists.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I can think of just in terms of that, like the Spider-Man legacy of, I know that people older than me were so like not into Todd McFarlane when he came on the scene, but for me, that's my first Spider-Man artist, and I'm like, yeah, well, he's not John Romita or John Romita Jr. He's Todd McFarlane.
Yeah, which is great. So, don't try to be John Romita Jr. All you can do is be yourself. There's only so many stories. Like, somebody thought of it before you did. I mean, of course. Even if you're not aware of it, like, I can't swear that in the entire human history of the written word, there's not some ass-kicking priest somewhere getting chased around by a mafia guy. I mean, how would I know,
No, all I can take you 10 lifetimes to figure that out.
Yeah, all I can do is put my own self into the story and say that I have a memory of my grandfather and me driving through the night to see him at the hospital because he was not going to make it, and I'm going to go say goodbye to him. By the time I get there, the doctors say, we don't know what happened, but he's totally fine and he's going home on Thursday. And for me to take that experience and say, what if that guy was an Irish mobster? And then to also, growing up Catholic and understanding last rites, and my wife works in a hospital, and, I've been in the room with dying family members when the priest comes in and things, and taking that experience and putting these two things together that I've experienced in my life. And now there's an idea for a story, and I could go through page by page and show you a line of dialogue or a character's expression or a moment and say, this happened where I was at a bar with my friend, and this somewhere else, and these are all the things that end up in this sort of big stew pot of your life that you pull from. And that makes my version of ass-kicking priest versus the mafia hopefully different than somebody else's version of ass-kicking priest fighting the mafia wherever that exists in the world that I have no idea about, Yeah.
Well, it's funny because aside from Preacher, which is a completely different world of an ass-kicking priest, but the only other ass-kicking priest. Did you ever see? I know you're not a horror movie fan, but are you aware of Peter Jackson's? I think it's his third movie or second movie, Dead Alive, Brain Dead. There's a scene, and it's like kind of a zombie movie, like these possessed things. But there's a scene where a priest fights and destroys all these creatures, and he's like, I kick ass for the Lord. That is the only other ass-kicking priest I can think of. So
I don't know that one, though.
But if and I know, like I said, I know you're on record talking about you're not a horror person, but it's kind of over the top gross. It's not scary.
Sure.
And it's hilarious.
Yeah. And I don't discount horror as a genre,
Sure.
Great films that are horror, I'm sure. For me, it's not like a prudishness or, I don't like those kinds of stories or whatever. For me, they get inside my head and, I'll have nightmares about them and I won't sleep. And like the smallest little thing, I can't put it aside, and so I have really, really hard time with those kinds of stories. And I have seen some horror movies and they're very good while I'm watching them. But that night doesn't go so well for me. I remember when I watched The Ring, I slept with the lights on 3 nights after I watched The Ring because it just gets in my head. And so for me, it's like I can't do it. I don't want to live in that headspace. It's not the headspace that I come from. It's not the headspace that I want to be in. But obviously, these are amazing films. And you look at something like The Exorcist, which I've also seen, and I'm only talking to you about it right now because it's daytime and I got, 6 hours of daylight till sundown and I can forget about it between now and then, Yeah. But what an amazing movie about faith.
Absolutely.
And just outstanding. Right. But I can't live in that headspace, And so, Brock McKinney, who's one of my best friends, him and his buddies, they rag on me because the first Alien movie I saw was Alien 3. I'd never seen the earlier ones because growing up, I didn't have movie channels and I was not allowed to watch our movies. Not because my parents, or my mom and my stepdad, or prudish either, but I think my mom just knew the kind of kid I was and was like, "You're not going to enjoy this, man. Like you don't want to do this, you know." And so I read Stephen King and things like that, but I never read Pet Sematary because my mom told me not to read it because I wouldn't like it. So to this day, I have not read Pet Sematary because my mom knows me and I trust her, you know. And so like I saw Alien 3 and I remember them talking about how much they hated Alien 3. And I was like, what's wrong with Alien 3? It's perfectly fine movie. They're in a prison, whatever, you know. But that's because that's the first Alien I saw. I saw Aliens.
Sure.
I think I saw Alien 3 and then Alien 4 and then Aliens. And the last one I saw was the original Alien.
The first.
Because, again, my mom had told me that's rated R. You don't want to watch that. It's going to fuck you up. She didn't say it like that. And so I never did until years and years and years later, you know. And so they're kind of mystified by that whole viewing experience of the Alien film.
That's kind of hilarious.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. My mom wouldn't let me watch Aliens, which made me want to watch it. And I went to my friend's house and watched it. And it was horrifying to see like all that gore, but I was fascinated with it. I wonder, and you know, I don't know the way your ideas come in, but because horror is such an effective thing in your head, I'd actually think it would be interesting to see you write something that was at least horror based, because you're coming from a place of real psychological, you know, like it messes you up. So I wonder if your take on a horror book would be interesting because of that.
I have some horror ideas, you know, that I've sort of written some rough outlines for. I'm not against it, you know, if I have the right idea and I can do it in the right way. I definitely don't like slasher stuff. I don't like when the violence is mean spirited or any of those kinds of things. You know, like I don't, you know, we have
enough of that in the real world.
Yeah. And it's just not, again, aesthetically, I'm not saying things don't have a right to exist or what have you. Right. But for me, the headspace that I come from, I'm a Superman guy, not a Batman guy, you know, like, I want to see the best in people. I want to believe that people could always be better and all those kinds of things. And I want to be more towards the light and less towards the dark, which is not to say I haven't read absolute masterworks that operate. I'm reading Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy right now. Like every sentence in that novel is better than anything I will write in my life, you know, and it comes from a very dark, grim, violent place. Yeah. I've never operated in that headspace really as a writer too much. Doesn't mean I never will. You know, I am tangling with a horror idea that I have right now that I'm trying to see if I can make work and do the kind of story that I want to do with it. But we'll see if it ever happens someday. But, you know, I read something like Cul-de-sac, which admittedly is not, you know, super gory, gruesome horror, but I love it. No. You know? And, you know, some of the Stephen King novels that I remember reading when I was younger, just fascinated by his ability with language and things. And, you know, I'm trying to think, I don't know. I have not read I read a Clive Barker novel once and I was like, man, that ain't for me. But I was looking over on my bookshelf here and trying to think if there's any other horror type things. There's probably not too much. From Hell would be, you know, that's one of the very first comics that I ever read. And it just absolutely floored me. I didn't know the medium could be that way, you know? And so it's just whether or not I have the skill set to pull those kinds of things off. But I don't know, maybe we'll see someday. No. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, I hearing just you describe how it affects you horror as a genre, it would be interesting. I think there are a lot of writers that don't realize that when they draw from their personal psychological feelings or whatever, mental feelings, like the reader feels that whether they know it or not. And I think, you know, I think it's, and in the comic book medium, as you know, it's a visual medium where you can do anything. There's no constraints. And I, you know, it's one of the beautiful things about comics is that like Planet Death, a giant ship that looks like a 357 Magnum or a Desert Eagle that's just going through space, and then a giant bat, like you could, you know, Derek and you can think of anything and put it right and you know, have it
and Tomas,
and Tomas can execute it.
I think that sentence description of that ship was maybe 2 sentences, and he came up with the whole idea of it looking like a gun in space. Like Tomas is an absolute genius, you know. But yes, it is true from the sense of, whether or not you do something like Planet Death, that is a massive interstellar space war story, or Ordained, which is very street level people in hospitals and churches, they both have the same budget because they're both just ink on paper, you know?
Yeah.
And so you can really push the medium to do pretty much anything you want to do, you know? Which is one of the big benefits of it, you know? So, yeah, horror is difficult, I think, in comics. You know, you linger on those static images in a way that you don't even in film. And, you know, I have there are people in my past who have been murdered. And so I think I also have like a bit of a reticence. You know, I would never want to glorify those things. But that's also very sort of, I don't know if egotistical is the right word, because there's plenty of things I do in my comics that somebody out there has experienced in their own life and have, you know, negative feelings towards it. And so for me, again, as a writer, it's just trying to operate from the space that's true to yourself and your own aesthetic. And maybe that's where you get the best stories. And if there is a story, the idea that I can come up with that's horror, that I feel like I can thread that needle, I won't shy away from it. And I think I have one. Just, you know, haven't gotten to the point where I'm fully convinced yet, you know. So
yeah. I did want to ask, because, you know, you mentioned that you didn't start reading comics into your 20s. And your first comic was made into a movie that was Surrogates, which is, you know, a wild thing to have happen in your first book. But going back when you were younger, what were some of the storytellers that affected you? I mean, you know, books that you read, movies you saw, like anything that you feel like was like, oh, this is amazing that this came from somebody's imagination or this came from somebody's mouth. I'd like to pursue this.
I always wanted to be a writer. I don't remember a time where I didn't want to be a writer. I can remember writing stories in like second grade. You know, my mom still has them, you know. That was kind of always what I wanted to do with my life. So I can't really say where that came from. I can tell you probably the first storyteller that really just, I was in awe of was my grandfather, my mother's father. He would tell stories about the Depression or World War II and his life experiences. And I mean, he was just an amazing, amazing guy, you know? And I didn't experience, this is going to sound strange, I didn't experience a lot of stories growing up, I think, as much as other people might have. You know, my parents didn't have the movie channels on cable, and I was limited in what I was able to see. And not from any sort of, you know, censoring perspective, but from a, you know, budgetarily, we're not going to pay for movies kind of place, you know. And I was always very busy. You know, I played 3 sports in high school and I had a job. And so I wasn't sitting in the movie theater a lot or reading books a lot or any of those kinds of things. I certainly read when I could. I read a lot of Stephen King. I read a lot of Tom Clancy. I read Lord of the Rings. I'm already kind of running out of what else I've read, you know, because I just wasn't. I was always doing something else, you know. And so I never read any comics at all. And what I found, I did like animation. I loved Saturday morning cartoons. Yeah. I loved, when I was in high school, like Thundercats and Silverhawks and things like that. Film-wise, when I got into college and now I'm an English major, I'm reading a lot more and I'm seeing a lot more. You know, that was when I saw Blade Runner for the first time, and Blade Runner just blew my mind, you know. But I think what I found out in my career is completely by accident. It wasn't like I didn't want to watch movies or I didn't want to read books or I didn't want these other things. I was doing other stuff, you know. There's only so many hours in the day, you know. What I found out is kind of accidentally, I had sort of built myself into this writer that the way I always describe it is you can't fake stupid, you know? And so like when they asked me to pitch on Hawkman, and I didn't know anything about Hawkman except what he looked like in a general sense. I didn't know that, you know, the Qatar hole, the the Thanagarian space cop and Carter Hall, the ancient Egyptian reincarnated as an archaeologist, I didn't know that they were separate people. I just started reading about the character on Wikipedia, and the first thought that came to my mind was, oh, I get it. The reincarnating ancient Egyptian also reincarnated and became a space cop, and he's probably reincarnated all over the universe and met a bunch of different things. Well, that's not what happened. But in my head, I was like, well, then that's how I'm going to fix the story, because that makes sense, right? But if I had grown up super steeped in comic books and Hawkman and knowing he was confusing and all these things, I might never have thought of that idea. And so the idea that I haven't seen a lot of these things, and I go through it with Dinesh all the time, who sort of functions as the main editor in terms of me, at least, talking through story and stuff, a bad idea. He'll always ask me, have you heard of this, or have you seen that, or whatever? And I'll say no, and in the beginning it was kind of a joke because I had never seen or read pretty much anything. But then he'll kind of walk me through it a little bit or whatever. And for better or for worse, I think it always allows me to come up with a take that is from my own experiences, and not because I'm steeped in the mythology of comics and I know all these different things, and I'm not referencing Spielberg films, and I'm not being reverent towards something, not because I don't want to, because I legitimately don't know, Right. The one exception to that in comics was when DC asked me to pitch for Superman 78, because after years of them asking me, we want you to write Green Lantern, I'd be like, I guess he's green and he must have a lantern, but I don't know what it does, They always knew that I knew the Christopher Reeve films. I would always say, I haven't read any Superman comics, but I know the Christopher Reeve films. And so when they asked me to write Superman 78, that was like a continuity. And those versions of the characters, Gene Hackman, Lex Luthor, and Margot Kidder, Lois Lane, those were things I was very, very, very familiar with and was able to operate from a place of knowing what that world was and writing from that space, which was a great joy to be able to do and to try to fit my story into that and be true to it, But I would say that's the one instance where I've been able to do that, And so, like I said, I don't know if it's a benefit. Maybe if I had seen all these movies and read all these comics and read all these books, I'd be a different writer entirely and maybe a better one. But I do think that it does allow me to be different, because the vast majority of people that are writers, I've found, have always wanted to be writers and have experienced storytelling over and over in all these forms. Yeah. And for me, it was just something I didn't have the hours of the day to do. I from before school started until a week before it ended, and most of the time over the summers, I was practicing for a sport, whether it was cross country or basketball or track. And then on Wednesdays and Fridays and Saturdays, I had a job where I would go work and make money. And so there just wasn't a lot of time for me to sit around. And all the books I did read, Lord of the Rings, Stephen King, Tom Clancy, I read them under my desk while I was sitting in school, not paying attention to what the lecture was, So
yeah. Well, I mean, I think for every comic writer that comes in that may be a lifelong comics fan, it's nice to have somebody that's just creating stories based on creating stories. And, then sure, you're fitting them into a continuity at DC or whatever, but even with the bad idea stuff and what you've got coming that you can't talk about, it's just, you're creating original stories. It's the thing that we all kind of crave. We're all looking for something. It doesn't have to be, like you said, you're not reinventing the wheel. You're just putting your spin on it. And that's what good writers do. I mean, yeah, sure. Not all of us not everybody could be C.S. Lewis or Tolkien. It's just not
sure. Happen. Yeah.
But I mean,
and also I always try to operate from a space of every comic book is somebody's first. And I try to make my stuff very new, really friendly, so that you can pick it up and read it, because I was that mythical, person who's never read a comic and walks into the comic book shop. There's Superman number 9 million and Spider-Man number 8 billion. And it's like, I don't know where to start,
Sure.
And so I always try to think about that as well,
It is a great way to, I mean, we spoke a little bit before, I approached this podcast in the same way. Like, I mean, I'm not super familiar. I've never read any of your DC work, to be honest. I'm new to your work, but that doesn't mean, I might represent 25 people. I might represent 25,000 people. There's people that know you, but I want to approach it as if, hey, here's this great writer. He's got these great books out now. You should take a look at them. And Ordained, I've really enjoyed it, and I really am enjoying Planet Death. So, I'm just here operating from a place of, hey, you might like it too.
I appreciate that. It's all downhill from there.
So Ordained is it's going to be 4 issues in total with that 0 issue,
yes.
Or is it 5?
Yeah, issues? 4 issues. They're all about 40 pages, so they're all oversized. It's I guess the equivalent of 8 traditional comic book issues. But there's the first 2 issues. Then there's a sort of a 0 issue featuring a character called the Machine, which is a hitman, and we've kind of followed him throughout his day and find out why Cormac Byrne hasn't been able to get him on the phone, and that sets up the big clash between those 2 characters in the final issue.
I don't know if I don't want to spoil anything even remotely, but is there room for more about this character, Father Roy?
You mean after this first series?
After this first series, is there a possibility of getting a story about where he comes from?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've finished an entire outline for a whole second miniseries already that's fully plotted, and the new characters added to the universe and all those kinds of things, and so that's already there. I guess you never know if you're going to do another thing or if you're going to do a new thing, So
sure.
See where the future rests. I already have 2 projects I'm working with for Bad Idea, one of which is completely written and one of which I'm writing now. And so will we come back to Ordained someday and do an additional story maybe, but it's sitting there ready to go if we ever do. But that doesn't mean we will. The thing about comics is I had more Green Lantern stories I could have done. I have more Hawkman stories I could have done. I have more X-Men stories I could have done, So you never know whether things are going to continue or not.
Sure. Well, I'm glad that the reception has been very warm on this first issue. And you have another, I think it was announced already. Is there another book you're doing with Derek coming out in the summer?
Yeah. It's called Warbird. It's another idea that I'm co-writing with Derek, and it's about a guy named Cole who is like he can drive anything, and so he's a repo man for super high-end things. Like if you buy a luxury yacht, you don't pay for it. He's the one who's going to come steal your yacht, So he gets hired by the U.S. government to go and steal a next-generation Russian fighter jet. And that's the story that we're working on. So a bit more espionage, a bit more, not out in space like Planet Death is. But yeah.
And not in a submarine.
That's a 3rd series, actually, that I didn't even think of when I was talking about the 2 I'm writing for Bad Idea. So there's 3 I'm writing for Bad Idea. That's one of them. That one's almost done already. So yeah, one of them is done. That one's almost done. And there's another one that we're writing right now. So
awesome. I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, just hearing the outline of Warbird, I'm on board. I'm on board because it sounds like, I
appreciate that.
Yeah, it sounds like something that, maybe might have been in, like something I played in a video game, like Grand Theft Auto. Like, yeah, I've stolen that before, but like an actual story instead of just a moment in a video game. And so I know I'd asked you previous before we even got this. I've been trying to make a more connective tissue between music and comics because there is a huge cross point of those. And I was just wondering if there's music that you like to write to or anything that you think pairs well with reading some of your stories.
Yeah, so I wish I could. I'm not able to write with music on. Like I can't write with the TV on in the background. I just write in like total silence. It's terrible because I spend half of my day in silence, But something about the words, I'll just start paying attention to the words, So I can't listen to podcasts. I can't listen to music. I can if I'm doing edits or I'm reading over lettering or something, but not when like I'm scripting new story,
Sure.
So I didn't have like a playlist I was listening to while I was writing Ordained or whatever, But I think if I was going to pick a couple of albums that I'm personally albums that I'm a real fan of that I think might tap into the emotions of the story in a way. I would say one would be Alice in Chains, Live at the Majestic, the MTV Unplugged album.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, there's just such a I want to say it was one of the last times, if not the very last time, Lane Staley played with them. And you can hear it in his voice that he's coming from a real hard spot. And I think a lot of what drives Father Roy is he's coming from a real hard spot. Another one would be Pink Floyd, "Wish You Were Here." One of my all-time favorite albums. And as you get to the third issue, the 0 issue of Ordained, that will make more sense. So I think those would probably be the two that I would say. In addition to that, I have some favorite Catholic hymns and things, but those aren't albums.
You might be able to find them on Spotify. I'm not sure. I've never.
Well, I know one of them actually. To stick with the grunge thing, I know one of them is a hymn called "Be Not Afraid," and Scott Weiland actually did a version of it that I don't even know if it ever appeared on an album or a CD somewhere, but you can find it on YouTube. And much like the Lane Staley thing I was saying earlier, you can just really hear it in his voice,
Yeah.
He's really struggling with some things, but that's my all-time favorite hymn is "Be Not Afraid." So you can go look that up.
I'm going to have to seek out that
if you want. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to have to seek that out. I mean, I grew up I'm a kid of the, 90s, and those bands are all the bands I grew up with. And yeah, I can, I listen to the Alice in Chains Unplugged pretty often. I mean, it, just nutshell and everything about that performance. It's tough for me to pick my favorite Unplugged because some days it's Alice in Chains, some days it's Nirvana, and then the in between is some days it's Pearl Jam.
Well, I'll give you an even better. I love of those three. Alice in Chains is my favorite. My all-time favorite Unplugged album is Neil Young's MTV Unplugged. I don't know if you've ever heard that, but oh man, that album. Oof. I mean, I just don't even know how you sing into a microphone like that, So that's my all-time favorite MTV Unplugged album. Yeah, Neil Young. So
well, and a lot of those bands that I had named would not probably be if Neil Young doesn't exist. I mean, especially
sure, yeah. Yeah.
So and I think there's just something that I think has been missing for a while between comics, where I think a lot of people should try and talk about music and comics together. This episode that just dropped today on the podcast, I interviewed Larry Reed, who's the longtime manager of Fantagraphics bookstore. And, he's a Seattle fixture, but he is the crossroads of music and comics in Seattle. He used to book Nirvana at shows, and then, he sells people Fantagraphics books for 20 years in the store in Seattle, which, so comics is a rich.
Yeah, you've got the whole Peter Bagg thing too, right? Like Peter Bagg when he was doing Hate and all that stuff. Which is some of the very first comics I ever read was Hate.
Interesting.
Yeah, I was working at a Borders, if you remember Borders bookstore.
Of course.
And I managed their newsstand, and they got Hate. And so the very first issue of Hate I read was like an annual after the series was already over. And then I spent a couple of years trying to piece together all the issues and read them, So yeah, that was some of the very first stuff that I read. I love music. My son's a musician. He's still in high school, but he has a band, and they're actually really good. And
cool.
He just gets it in a way that I knew it. If I could be anything in the world, it'd be a musician. But I knew at a very young age, this doesn't make sense to me. I knew that I would be able to memorize notes and repeat a song, but I didn't understand on a level where I could make my own song. And that's what I wanted, was the creativity. I started to write, and I understood language, and I understood how to put sentences together in a way that I don't music notes and scales and all that kind of stuff. And so, I love music. I could go on and on. We could talk a whole hour about music if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Another thing that's a bit more of a deeper cut. that I'm a huge fan of is the band America. If anybody even knows who America is.
Oh yeah, I know that band.
Yeah, they were a group that I think they were on a military base in London, I think, and they were all kids from America who met in high school on the military base, formed this band called America. And when you listen to their music, you can hear them pining for home. Like you hear things like Ventura Highway or Sister Golden Hair and things like that, and it's like they're trying to transport themselves back home, and there's such a longing in their music, but also a celebration of it, and I tend to have, I'm very, very blessed in the sense that my stepdad, who was a lot older than my mother, he was a DJ. He would do weddings and reunions and things like that. And because he was so much older, I grew up in a house where Sunday was always chore day, and you weren't allowed to do anything until you did all your chores around the house. I had, 3 older brothers. My older brothers were always all listening to classic rock, Rush and Scorpions and, Led Zeppelin and all those things. It would be a little bit before my time, Pink Floyd, but I'm hearing it all through them. And so I'm aspiring to the music they listen to. And at the same time, my stepdad is playing everything from doo-wop to America to ABBA to Bob Seger, like all these different things. And so I grew up in this really big stew of just hearing all this stuff. And really the kind of only music I never really liked was current music, because I was always listening to the stuff from like different generations, and like I don't really know that I've liked any music since the 90s, like since the grunge era. I don't really, there's nothing that I really, there's bands that come out like something like Wolfmother that's obviously, going back to an era and sounding a certain way, and but I drive in the car and I hear the stuff that's on modern radio, and it's just I don't really have much interest in it, So Radiohead would be an exception, that's post 90s.
Sure.
Oasis, but
right.
Not too much of it. I tend to come earlier than that, So my first concert I ever saw, I was in middle school. I saw Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band. It was the first concert I ever saw. So yeah.
I grew up in a similar household. My dad listened to Motown, and I was raised on a steady diet of the Doors, and my mom liked the Stones and all that. And then my brother got me into like the heavier stuff, Metallica and some of the punk bands and stuff. And then I grew up and Nirvana hit, and I was like, okay, I'm in, give it all to me. And
yeah, I'm going to say something controversial here. You're not going to like it. I'm going to say it anyways, though. I never liked Nirvana, and it's not even Nirvana's fault. Like, I never liked Nirvana because of where I grew up, the people who liked Nirvana. They were like, the people that were playing Nirvana the loudest were the ones in like the brand new cars whose like parents paid for everything and like didn't have jobs. You know what I mean? And I was just like, what teen spirit are you smelling right now? Like, like, what are you so mad about, dude? And so obviously they're musical geniuses and their contribution is huge, but I can't listen to them and not think of all, which is not Nirvana's fault. Nirvana did a song about this very thing. You know what I mean? And so it's not Nirvana's fault at all. It's just the way it was imprinted on me. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I'll counter
Alice in
you
Chains is my favorite of the grunge era bands, Yeah.
Fair enough. And they're, I have, besides Pearl Jam, it's hard for me to really rank anything because Pearl Jam's always been my favorite band. But I'll match you with a controversial music opinion in the same way. I hate Led Zeppelin because of the people that I grew up on Long Island with that listened to Led Zeppelin. And I hated those people, and they made me hate that band. So
it's like you hear it and you remember those people. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And
but I mean, I can't imagine living where you're living. Were you there in the 90s when all this stuff was going on?
No. I moved here only 11 years ago.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, because I can't even imagine. Like, I grew up in South Florida in the era of like Miami Vice, and the Miami Hurricanes were the best team in the country, and Two Live Crew was like getting banned in Congress and whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
It felt like you were at the center of the universe. But I mean, in terms of art, that's nothing compared to growing up in Seattle in that time. I can't even imagine. I mean, just these bands are just falling out of the trees, and they're just every club you go to, some crazy band that's going to go on to be this awesome thing, And like, I don't even know what that would be like,
Yeah, like seeing Soundgarden play with Alice in Chains before they were both big, and then a year later they're both huge. I mean, that's kind of the thing about Seattle's art scene in general. 1980 Love and Rockets debuts, 1990 or 91 Nevermind debuts, and it's like in 10 years, what comes from the output of things happening in Seattle, Pete Bag hate, and all of these things. So
pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I love talking to people about it because it's like we can all pick something that came from certain regions of this country in scenes that connects us,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, look, we've got an hour under our belt here. Ordained #2 is coming. Do we have a release date for it? Because like you said, it was pushed back a little bit to make.
Yeah, it did get pushed back. Ordained #2 is going to come out the same day as the third printing of #1, and that is also the same day as Hank Our Pizza Detective #2. That's February 11th. Yeah, so
February 11th.
You can buy it for your boyfriends and husbands and wives and girlfriends. You know what I mean? Valentine's Day. Gift,
Yes, exactly. It's a great Valentine's Day present. And then we have Planet Death 3 on the way pretty soon.
We do. I don't think it's been solicited yet. I have a tentative date when I think it'll be out, but I don't want to say and be incorrect.
Yeah. We don't want to give people wrong information. And then, so much more to come from you, some more announcements along the way. But yeah, I can speak for myself and a couple of friends that have read Ordained. Like, everybody should be picking up that third print. I'm finally going to get a copy. It'll be that. And I hope you get your comp soon.
Yeah, hopefully I'll have mine before yours. I don't know.
Well, Robert, thank you so much for your time today. And I know you're going to be at C2E2, but I'll post all your social links and stuff like that in the description below so everybody can follow you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It was great talking with you. If you ever need anything, just let me know.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Robert, for your time and great conversation. Honestly, was not 100% sure how long we would be talking for. And then towards the end, we realized we probably could have talked for another hour. So definitely going to have him back. And, if you are not reading Ordained, the third printing will be out in February, right before the second issue drops. These are meaty issues, 40 pages, as Robert said. So you're getting a little bit more bang for your buck for sure. And you're getting a fun story. Planet Death is no different. It's also a lot of fun. I have not read Survive or Hank Howard, but I will be reading those because getting to know him through his writing and now getting to talk to him, I want to keep supporting him and I want to see what other stories he has to tell. That's basically why I'm here, is to discover and help other people discover the things that I'm enjoying. So, other than that, you can also go check out his older work, which I plan to do some research, some backing research. I want to check out Hawkman because I've never read a Hawkman comic. I've read Green Lantern, but I've never read Hawkman. So that I definitely want to check out. And Superman 78, because I think I'm lacking in some more Superman. I've read a bunch. I've read the greats, but I like when people have interesting stories to tell. And Superman 78 definitely seems that way. So I'll be supporting Robert's older work too, as well as his new work. I hope you pick up one of these books that we talked about, specifically Ordained or Planet Death, or both. Thank you so much for listening. If you are not subscribed, please consider doing so. You're going to just keep getting great interviews, or at least interviews that I think are good. And if you trust my taste, then yeah. Spotify, you can leave reviews. You can also leave comments. You can subscribe on there, obviously. Apple, you can leave reviews. Amazon, I don't know if they have a review system, but somebody can tell me. And then YouTube, you can like it, subscribe, and comment, and all that good stuff. I have a Patreon. $5 a month is going to get you bonus episodes of Direct Edition, bonus episode of West Coast Davengers, my other comic-based channel, as well as you'll get to vote for a flip-through book a flip-through video that I'm going to do a top-down flip-through. So lots of stuff going on over there. I do a exclusive sale there every 2 months of stuff that is not available to the public, and it helps me support and pay my editor. Thank you so much to Phil. And also shout out to you, Andrew, for helping me with the synopsises on these episodes. I couldn't do it without these two humans, so big thanks to both of you. And thank you to the listener. That's you, the one, the watcher. Uatu. Anyway, I'm done. What are you still doing here? What am I still doing here?